We return to the moments just before the journey began, a brief pause before the storm. Zhang Cheng and Lu Jinhai were suspended in the air, blissfully unaware of the horrors waiting for them in the shadows of the forest. They were clutched tightly in the mantis wolf's multi-jointed insectoid limbs. The cold, hard texture of the beetle-like carapace dug into Zhang Cheng's ribs, a constant, unpleasant reminder of their captor's strength.
See anything interesting on that screen?
Zhang Cheng's brow furrowed, a spark of genuine irritation flickering in his gaze as he glanced sideways.
Shut it! Your breath is blowing right in my face, and it's disgusting.
Hey, I don't have bad breath.
Lu Jinhai muttered under his breath, his expression shifting into a defensive pout. Zhang Cheng ignored him, his focus entirely on the flickering screen of the drone controller. Below them, the rat swarm was a chaotic, surging tide of gray, moving with a desperate, unified purpose. As he scanned the feed, something caught his eye, an anomaly in the pattern of the swarm's flight.
Wait, what the hell is that?
He adjusted the drone's flight path, panning the camera back toward a specific patch of the gnarled forest canopy.
What did you find?
Remembering the earlier complaint, Lu Jinhai pointedly kept his head turned away while he spoke.
Did you figure out why those rats are acting so crazy?
He finally gave in to curiosity, leaning closer to peer over Zhang Cheng's shoulder at the small, glowing display.
Look at the rats. They're throwing themselves onto the trees.
What? You mean they're committing suicide?
Zhang Cheng didn't answer, instead pointing a trembling finger toward a corner of the display. Lu Jinhai squinted, his eyes widening as the grainy image resolved into a nightmare. Dozens of rats were impaled on the jagged spikes of the gnarled trees below. These weren't random accidents. The spikes were everywhere from the thickest trunks to the highest branches, even protruding from the exposed roots like biological needles. The distribution was chaotic. While the lower spikes were smaller and thinner, the ones at the canopy level were thick enough to skewer a man. The horror lay in the angle of the wounds. The spikes had entered from the front, through noses, through eyes, through mouths. The rats hadn't been hunted. They had been running so fast, so blindly, that they had impaled themselves on the environment. This was a flight of pure, unadulterated panic. They were fleeing something so terrifying that death by impalement was a secondary concern.
If they're this scared, if they're literally running themselves through just to get away, what the hell is coming for them?
Lu Jinhai's voice wavered. He knew these rats. Individually, they were pests, but in these numbers, they were a force of nature. To see a force of nature in retreat was chilling. He thought of Hua. Even her nightly hunts, as brutal as they were, had never caused a mass exodus like this. Whatever was out there in the dark was something far more horrific than the strongest person they knew.
No, it's not just the spikes. Look closer at their bodies.
Zhang Cheng shook his head, his fingers dancing across the controller as he sent the drone into a steep dive, chasing the shadows of the forest floor.
There's something growing on them. Something wrong.
What are you talking about? They're rats. They probably just have fleas or something. They wouldn't be this scared of a few bugs, would they?
Lu Jinhai leaned in, his eyes scanning the flickering display. At first, he saw only the gray blur of fur and the dark smears of blood on the spiked bark. But as the drone's camera zoomed in, the fur began to resolve. It wasn't hair. It was a dense, writhing forest of tiny, fleshy appendages.
Wait, why is their fur moving? Is it the wind?
That's not fur, you idiot. Look at the thickness. Look at the way it pulses. Those are meat sprouts.
Meat? Sprouts?
The sprouts were sickening to behold. Their tips were a bruised black, fading into a deep, visceral crimson at the base. They looked like parasitic anemones clinging to a dying host. Even on the rats that had already died, impaled and lifeless, the meat sprouts continued to writhe and twitch with a grotesque, independent vitality.
My God, they're covered in them. Even their tails. It's like they're being eaten from the inside out.
Zhang Cheng remained silent, his expression grim as he manipulated the drone to sweep across the remaining swarm. He was no longer just observing. He was looking for a pattern.
Not every rat is infected yet. Look at these few. Their tails are still clean. No sprouts, no discoloration. Wait, look at the one on the left. The tail, it's starting.
Zhang Cheng suddenly went rigid, his breath hitching in his throat as he stared at the screen. On the display, the transformation was happening in real time. The few rats that had seemed healthy were now erupting with tiny, dark red buds along their tails, a rapid, aggressive growth.
It's contagious, and it's spreading faster than anything I've ever seen. Does it just take physical contact? The speed of the transmission is impossible.
You mean it's a plague? A disease?
Lu Jinhai's voice went sharp with panic. For the last 2 months, these rats had been their only sustenance. The thought of what they had been putting into their bodies made his stomach churn. They had grown used to the oily, fishy tang of the meat, even joking about seasoning it. But if the source was tainted, if they were already hosts to whatever this was...
Oh God, look at the scales on my back. They're already weird enough. If these meat sprouts start growing out of me too, I'll be a monster, a complete freak.
Disease? No, it feels like something else.
Zhang Cheng trailed off, his mind racing through possibilities. But the theoretical musing was cut short by a sudden sharp pressure against his chest. The mantis wolf's insectoid legs, which had been holding them with a firm but steady grip, suddenly constricted. The chitinous segments groaned as they squeezed the air out of Zhang Cheng's lungs.
Gah! Too tight! It's crushing me!
Lu Jinhai felt the pressure too, though his broader build and the protective plating of his scales shielded him from the worst of it.
Hey, you ugly bug! Can you hear me? You're squeezing too hard, loosen up.
The creature didn't respond to the command. If anything, the pressure intensified, its grip becoming a vice that threatened to snap their ribs like dry twigs.
Something's wrong. It's not just squeezing, it's reacting to something.
The rhythmic thrumming of the mantis wolf's wings accelerated into a frantic, high-pitched roar. The creature's entire body began to vibrate with a disturbing, predatory excitement.
Hey, you listening to me? I said let go.
The contraction became unbearable. Zhang Cheng's face went pale, his vision blurring as the chitinous plates ground into his ribs. Lu Jinhai, seeing his friend's agony, acted on instinct. He balled his fist and hammered it against the creature's soft, segmented abdomen, a desperate attempt to force a reaction. The reaction was instantaneous and catastrophic. The mantis wolf shrieked, its multi-jointed legs snapping open in a sudden, violent reflex. Gravity took hold. The 2 survivors plummeted from a height of 5 stories, the dark sky rushing away as the gnarled, spike-covered canopy of the forest rose to meet them. Below them lay a forest of biological needles, a graveyard designed for anything that fell from the sky. They were destined to be skewered before they even hit the ground.
Zhang Cheng?
In the heart-stopping moment of freefall, Lu Jinhai's hand clamped onto Zhang Cheng's. With a strength born of desperation, he yanked his friend close, curling his own massive armored body around the smaller man. Zhang Cheng's world dissolved into a roar of wind and the crushing embrace of his friend. He squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the final lethal impact. A thunderous explosion of sound erupted in Zhang Cheng's ears, followed by the heavy, bone-jarring impact of flesh hitting the earth. The shockwave rippled through him, making his internal organs feel as if they had shifted out of place. Nausea surged in his throat, a bitter wave of sickness that threatened to overwhelm him.
Lu Jinhai? Are you...
The realization hit him harder than the ground. Lu Jinhai was beneath him. His friend had intentionally taken the brunt of the fall, acting as a human cushion to shield him from the impact. Lu Jinhai lay flat on his back, the gnarled biological scales along his spine digging into the earth. It was those very scales that had saved them, their inhuman toughness resisting the sharp, lethal spikes of the thicket. They had been lucky! The mantis wolf's sudden descent before the release and the cushioning effect of the snapped branches had combined with Lu Jinhai's sacrifice to leave Zhang Cheng miraculously unharmed. Zhang Cheng gasped for air, his hands searching for purchase as he tried to scramble out of his friend's protective embrace. But as he moved, a new sound reached him, a high-pitched, chaotic cacophony of chattering teeth and skittering claws. They hadn't just landed in the forest. They had fallen directly into the seething, terrified heart of the rat swarm. Lin Yi stared at the mantis wolf's compound eyes. Fleshy, pulsating sprouts erupted from the facets, writhing like miniature worms. The realization hit him with a cold chill. This wasn't natural. This fungal infestation was a deliberate act of sabotage. In the 2 months they had survived in these woods, they hadn't seen anything this repulsive. Flower and her kin had claimed this territory for ages. If a threat like this existed naturally, they would have been wiped out long before Lin Yi ever arrived. Chu Kai leaned in, his face hardening as he scrutinized the creature's mangled form.
The eyes are just the beginning. Look at the joints.
Beneath the thick beetle carapace, the rot had taken hold. Foul, pale mushrooms sprouted from the delicate hinges of its limbs, hidden from a casual glance but deeply rooted in the creature's mechanics.
This thing, it's more mushroom than monster now. It's been completely consumed.
The mantis wolf was a corpse, a hollow shell animated by a parasitic hunger. The fungus had spread with unnatural speed, its spores claiming every organ and nerve. It wasn't the creature moving anymore. It was merely a macabre puppet dancing on fungal strings. To keep this rot from spreading through the forest, there was only one solution. They had to destroy it, completely. Every trace had to be reduced to ash. Lin Yi hesitated, his gaze drifting toward Flower. The mantis wolf was dead, its mind gone, so her calming scent could no longer pacify it. He knew she saw these creatures as her family, and even though this one was a lost cause, he worried how she would take its destruction. But Flower didn't need his pity. Her reaction was swifter and far more cold-blooded than he had anticipated. Before anyone could react, thick, thorn-studded vines erupted from Flower's silhouette, whipping through the air like organic lashes. As the mantis wolf hit the dirt, the fungal sprouts at the point of contact began to writhe and multiply. Without a flicker of hesitation or pity, Flower detached the contaminated vine from her own body. 2 more emerald lashes snaked around the monster's limbs, pinning it to the earth. Once the beast was secured, Flower severed those links as well, leaving the creature bound in her dying limbs. The sheer clinical efficiency of her violence left Lin Yi and the others paralyzed in shock. Flower turned her emotionless gaze toward Chu Yun, her voice as sharp as a winter frost.
Chu Yun, incinerate it now. Wait, what? Its life is already gone. There is nothing left to save. It was heading back to our nest. If it reaches the others, the infection will consume them all.
Lin Yi watched her, realization dawning. Whether by instinct or the fungus's dark design, that puppet was a vector for extinction. Flower wasn't being cruel, she was being protective. He wondered if he could have done the same, sacrificed a loved one to save the many. He clenched his fists, hardening his resolve. He couldn't afford to be weak. Not anymore. Chu Kai stepped forward, his hand resting briefly on his sister's shoulder as he nodded.
Listen to her, Xiao Yun. Do it.
Chu Yun took a resolute step forward, her hands raised as if in a defensive posture. On the backs of her heavy metal gauntlets, the embedded crystals began to throb with a rhythmic, ghostly luminescence. They had initially thought to give the gauntlets to Cheng Dao or Lu Lin Hai, but the veteran warriors had struggled with the complex controls. Compared to the simple mechanics of a shotgun, these high-tech relics were temperamental and demanding. Using them required more than just physical strength. It required a psychic resonance, a subtle tether between the wearer and the machine. Zhang Cheng theorized that the interior was packed with advanced sensors. He'd hovered over them for days with his tools, his eyes gleaming with academic hunger. But he'd ultimately backed down, fearing he could never reassemble such intricate technology. Unlike a standard firearm, the crystals didn't just fire on command. They had to be coaxed, the energy meticulously channeled and manually triggered through sheer focus. It was a delicate dance of power management. Mastery over the crystals unlocked several lethal functions. By guiding the energy to overflow and pool around the hands, the user could manifest a shimmering, invisible barrier, the defensive shield mode. By narrowing the output to a single point at the fingertips, the energy could be compressed into a searing beam. This ranged mode carried a devastating incendiary punch, capable of downing airborne threats in a single blast. But Chu Yun's preference was for direct confrontation. By wrapping the entire gauntlet in a sheath of raw power, she could deliver bone-crushing strikes with melee mode, turning her fists into weapons of mass destruction. Standing beside such sophisticated hardware, the crude shotguns Brother Lei had scavenged seemed like primitive toys, relics of a far simpler and less dangerous era. The distinction was clear. While the shotgun was a mass-produced tool for foot soldiers, these gauntlets were elite, specialized instruments. Their multifaceted nature was a testament to their superior design. For all their combat experience, and Cheng Dao and Lu Linhai were too rugged for such a delicate interface. They lacked the finesse needed to tap into the true potential of the gauntlets. Lin Yi and Chu Kai, already burdened by their own developing powers, had stepped aside. They had no need for more complexity in their lives. Zhang Cheng, true to his nature, had dismissed the weapons as tools of war. To him, they were puzzles to be solved, not assets to be deployed in the field. In the end, the choice had fallen to Chu Yun. It was a gamble that had paid off instantly. She had an innate, almost instinctive connection with the device. A concentrated beam of energy sliced through the mantis wolf's armored shell with surgical precision. But as the light faded, a sudden, violent anomaly erupted that took them all by surprise. The rot wasn't merely skin deep. Within the hollowed-out chest of the mantis wolf, every organ had been replaced by a dense, pulsating mat of fungal fibers. A cloud of fine, dark spores had already saturated every remaining inch of the creature's interior. The explosion was contained, but the danger of inhalation remained. Reacting on pure instinct, Lin Yi threw his arm around Flower, hauling her back from the drifting cloud.
Don't breathe it in. Stay back from the spores.
As Lin Yi shielded her, a ghost of an expression crossed Flower's face, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps a long-buried memory. It was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual cold apathy.
I didn't mean for that to happen. I'm so sorry. It's okay, Zhao Yun. None of us knew it was a ticking time bomb.
And Cheng Dao's expression shifted from concern to a dark, simmering dread. If one creature was a vector, the entire forest was a minefield. His mind immediately went to the others out in the dark.
If this one was a carrier, then Lin Hai and Zhang Cheng are walking into a slaughterhouse. I can't stay here. I'm going after them.
I'm with you, Uncle An. We can't leave them out there.
Chu Kai and Chu Yun moved as one, checking their gear and tightening their packs. The comfort of the clearing was gone. The mission had changed.
The forest is different now. Tread carefully, or the rot will claim you as well.
She made no move to join them. Her duty, it seemed, lay with the nest and the creatures she called family. She stood like a sentinel as they began their descent into the dark. As they crossed the threshold of the clearing, the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees were twisted, skeletal hands reaching through a fog that smelled of decay and ozone. A cold weight settled in Lin Yi's chest. This infestation wasn't a natural disaster, it was a deployment. The fungus was merely the first wave.
If the masters are pulling the strings, what kind of endgame are they playing for?
The time for preparation was over. The hunt had truly begun, and they were no longer the predators. The group follows the path of the fleeing rat swarm, only to stumble upon a grisly sight. A series of rat carcasses are impaled on the sharp, jagged thorns of the forest thicket.
They impaled themselves.
Lin Yi says, his voice flat as he stares at the carnage. He recognizes the signs instantly. The fleshy buds erupting from the rats' bodies are the same grotesque parasites he saw infecting the mantis wolves. The hive mind had stolen their autonomy. Driven by a frantic impulse, the rats had slammed into the spiked trees with enough force to drive the wooden spikes through their vitals. Now, the sprouts are shriveled and dry. The parasites have finished feeding, having drained every drop of life from their host before their brief existence ended.
These spores, they seem to only infect animals other than humans.
To test his theory, Lin Yi reaches out to touch one of the fleshy buds. It isn't recklessness, he has his own unique defense. If the spores could take root in a human host, the threads of fate would have shimmered into existence, warning him of the impending catastrophe. But as his fingers brush against the fungus, the spectral threads remain silent. The bark of the monstrous trees also shows no signs of new fungal growth. Lin Yi theorizes that the fungi are unable to spread to humans. Still, the group keeps their faces covered with wet cloth to prevent inhaling the spores. It's a precaution against mushroom lung, a lethal condition caused by the airborne spores. The damp fabric acts as a reliable barrier against inhalation. Chu Kai maintains a razor-sharp focus, his sensory enhancement reaching out through the dense, suffocating thicket. He is the group's eyes and ears in this wooden graveyard.
Something's wrong with the trees up ahead?
Chu Kai calls out, his pace quickening as he spots something in the distance. The strange trees ahead bear the marks of a violent impact. Many of the needle-sharp thorns have been snapped off by the force of a collision.
There's something on the ground.
And Cheng Dao says, pointing to a ring of pale green powder circling the base of a tree.
This scent, it's the flowers.
Chu Kai notes, his brow furrowed as he sniffs the air.
The flower?
Lin Yi muses for a moment before the pieces click together.
I know what this is. It's Zhang Cheng.
During their months of training, Zhang Cheng would often slip away to tinker with various items. Lin Yi recalls seeing him grinding stones and drying materials in the sun. Those materials were the flower's vines. Zhang Cheng had been preparing for this moment long before they left their sanctuary.
This powder, it's made from dried and ground flower vines.
Lin Yi explains to his companions.
Why would he grind them into powder?
And Cheng Dao asks, looking skeptical.
The scent.
Chu Kai replies, glancing at the green dust.
To the rats of this forest, the flower is their ultimate predator.
Rats are intelligent creatures with an acute sense of smell. They can detect the presence of a predator long before they see it. The flower has preyed on them for centuries, and that primal terror is hardwired into their collective consciousness. One whiff of that scent is enough to drive them into a panic. Zhang Cheng had prepared this vine powder as a contingency. If they were ever swarmed by rats, the scent of their natural enemy would provide a non-violent deterrent.
They couldn't have fallen from the sky, could they?
Chu Kai asks, his eyes tracking up the gnarled trunks toward the impenetrable canopy.
The impact marks, they're too high up. Only a fall from above explains the damage to those branches.
It's possible.
Lin Yi agrees, his voice low.
The spores are airborne. They could have infected the flying freaks. Once the parasite took hold, the hosts might have simply dropped their prey. Gravity did the rest.
Lin Yi approaches one of the spike-covered trees. On the jagged, broken thorns, he spots faint, dark smears of dried blood.
They're gone. If they hit these trees and aren't here now, they survived the fall.
Lin Yi says, though his own words sound hollow to his ears. To survive a plunge from such a height, even with the branches breaking the fall, seems impossible. The injuries should have been catastrophic. Yet the bloodstains are sparse. There are no bodies, no signs of a gruesome end at the base of the timber.
The scent continues further ahead. They're still moving. Let's go.
Chu Kai says, his confidence cutting through the dread. A wave of relief washes over Lin Yi. If Zhang Cheng and Lu Linhai are still on the move, they are functional, at least enough to keep walking. Zhang Cheng is nothing if not cautious. If they were truly incapacitated, he would have found a way to hunker down and wait for rescue. The lack of signs of a struggle is another good omen. Zhang Cheng would have left a signal, a mark, something if they had been cornered. The group pushes deeper into the suffocating woods, but the further they go, the more Chu Kai's expression twists into a mask of revulsion.
What's wrong? Did you lose the trail?
Lin Yi asks, noticing the way Chu Kai is flinching from the air.
The scent. It's being buried.
Chu Kai says, sniffing the air aggressively before gagging on a sudden pungent wave of decay.
There's a stench of rotting meat, thick, cloying, and everywhere. It's masking their trail completely.
Rats ahead.
And Cheng Dao shouts, pointing toward the forest floor where the first of many carcasses lie. A few rats lie scattered across the ground, their bodies grotesquely bloated. Fleshy buds erupt from their skin, but unlike the impaled ones, these animals met no violent end. It's as if the entire swarm simply collapsed mid-stride. As they move forward, the number of carcasses begins to rise, a carpet of dead vermin stretching into the gloom.
Did they all just drop dead?
Lin Yi wonders, the scene defying any biological logic he knows. Normally, an infected freak returns to its nest to spread the plague. This outbreak seems to have decimated the colony in a matter of hours, leaving a trail of shriveled corpses. But the direction is the strangest part. Every single rat was heading the same way, as if drawn by an irresistible siren call toward a central point.
Wait, I hear something.
Chu Kai says, freezing in place. His head tilts, his enhanced ears filtering through the heavy silence.
It's a human voice. Someone is crying for help.
Help. Is it Lu Linhai or Zhang Cheng?
And Cheng Dao asks, his hand tightening instinctively on his weapon.
No.
Chu Kai shakes his head, his expression turning grim.
It's a voice I've never heard before.
Could it be the one who spread the fungi?
Lin Yi muses aloud.
These things didn't appear by accident. Someone introduced them into this forest. Let's check it out.
Lin Yi decides after a moment of calculation.
The trail for the others ends right here. They might have found this person too. If we find them, we might finally get a lead on what's really happening.
As they draw closer to the source of the voice, the forest floor gives way to a scene of absolute, stomach-churning horror. The ground is a literal carpet of dead rats, shriveled fungal buds erupting from their bodies like a grotesque harvest. The sheer density of the corpses makes the air feel thick and heavy. Layer upon layer of vermin are piled so high that solid ground is a memory. The group has no choice but to step directly onto the sea of decaying flesh. Every step is a nightmare. The sensation is sickeningly soft, punctuated by wet, muffled thuds as their boots sink deep into the mass of shriveled hosts. It's only the parasitic fungus that makes it bearable. The organisms have consumed the rats' internal organs entirely, leaving behind only hollow, leathery husks. As they push further, the mountain of rats grows even deeper, a rising tide of gray fur and white sprouts. And there, at the apex of the charnel mound, lies a naked man. He is face down, his lower half submerged in the mound of rotting flesh as if the forest itself were attempting to swallow him.
Save me!
The man rasps, his voice a weak, rattling whisper.
I don't want to die!
He is deathly pale, his skin translucent and stretched thin over his bones. He looks like a ghost that has been dragged back into the world of the living by a nightmare. The air was thick with the copper tang of blood and the sickening sweet rot of thousands of dead rodents.
What the hell is that thing?
Chu Kai's voice trembled slightly as he pointed toward a slumped figure nearly swallowed by the sea of gray fur.
A human.
Lin Yi replied, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the perimeter.
No kidding, I'm not blind. But why would someone be lying in the middle of a rat swarm?
And Cheng Dao stepped toward the mound, his hand tightening on his blade, but Lin Yi quickly blocked his path.
Don't go over there, Uncle Ann. Something's wrong. There isn't a single bite mark on him, even though he's surrounded by vermin.
Through the dim light, the man's back was visible, covered in jagged, poorly healed surgical scars that looked like hideous centipedes.
Zhang Cheng and Lu Linhai come first. We can't afford to get distracted by whatever this is.
Lin Yi looked at the path ahead. The fungal stalks on the flattened rats swayed in a breeze they couldn't feel.
Let's go. We find the others first. Then we decide if this person is worth saving.
In a world where monsters wore human skin, hesitation was a death sentence. The group turned to leave the graveyard of rats behind. As they turned to leave, a dry, rhythmic scratching sound broke the heavy silence of the forest. Lin Yi snapped his head back, his shotgun leveled at the mound. The figure remained motionless atop the sea of gray fur.
I could have sworn I heard something moving.
I heard it too. It's the sound of something crawling, something large.
Chu Kai's eyes were locked onto the man's torso, his pupils dilated with growing dread.
Wait, was his waist always that long?
And Cheng Dao leaned in, squinting. The man's midsection seemed to be stretching, elongating right before their eyes like pulled taffy.
Help! Help me!
A pale, trembling hand reached out from the mound, clawing desperately at the air.
I beg you, please,
The man's voice was a wet, rattling wheeze, but Chu Kai's face had gone deathly pale.
Chu Kai, what's wrong? Why are you looking at him like that?
And Cheng Dao's knuckles whitened as he tightened his grip on his heavy bone-chopping knife.
It's not just him. There are other voices crying out for help.
Chu Kai's gaze dropped to the shifting pile of rats, his eyes scanning the gaps between the corpses.
They're coming from underneath, right below the pile.
Lin Yi felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He looked at the mound, imagining bodies buried deep under the layer of rotting vermin.
How many can you tell for sure?
3. 2 women and another man. They just started calling out as soon as he moved.
A faint, rhythmic whispering began to rise from the depths of the pile, a chorus of broken voices.
Did you hear that? They said, St. Farrell's city-state.
St. Farrell? What kind of name is that supposed to be?
Chu Kai shook his head, his hands instinctively covering his ears as if to block out the sounds only his heightened senses could capture.
Sounds like a place from overseas. Foreign. Nothing to do with us.
I don't care where they're from. Zhang Cheng and Lu Linhai aren't here. We're leaving now.
Lin Yi's survival instincts were screaming at him to flee. This place was a charnel house of secrets he had no desire to uncover. They hadn't gone 3 paces before the forest erupted with a sound like wet leather dragging over stone. They spun around to see the creature's waist had stretched to impossible lengths, coiling through the rat mound like a bloated gray serpent.
Stay back. I take back what I said earlier. That thing is definitely no human.
The monstrosity accelerated, slithering over the sea of corpses with a sickening, liquid speed, its upper half lunging forward. Its right cheek was a crater of putrid meat, where dozens of twitching insectoid legs tore at the decaying flesh from within. A jagged surgical seam split the face in two. The left eye was nothing but a bottomless black pit devoid of any soul. From its throat, a thick, barbed tentacle slithered out. Its tip peeled open to reveal a single, lidless, non-human eye that stared directly at them.
Help me!
The voice was a wet rattle. Suddenly, the creature's waist coiled, thrusting its torso high above the mound of rats. With a sound like snapping wood, dozens of grayish-white ribs burst through the skin of its waist, spreading out like the legs of a giant centipede.
What in the name of God is this guy?
The nightmare had shed its human mask, revealing a skeletal, multi-legged horror that defied all biological reason. Without warning, the stranger's torso cracked wide, ribs splaying out like a skeletal trap. Lin Yi didn't hesitate. His hunting rifle was already up, the barrel cold and steady as he aimed for the monster's distended midsection. A blinding streak of concentrated energy erupted from the muzzle, tearing through the air before slamming directly into those hideous, centipede-like bone structures. The impact was absolute, pulverizing the creature's unnatural defenses in an instant. The detonation ripped the man's torso away from his lower half. Blood and viscera sprayed across the ground in a grotesque arc as the force of the blast literally tore him in two.
What the hell was that for?
Chu Kai recoiled, his entire body jerking as the shockwave of the blast nearly threw him off balance. The unexpected roar, occurring right next to him, sent a jolt of pure adrenaline-fueled panic through his system.
A little warning would be nice. I just got my vision back. You trying to blow my eardrums out next?
Because of his sensory enhancement, Chu Kai's hearing was dialed to a supernatural level. He hadn't yet deactivated his auditory focus when Lin Yi pulled the trigger, making the sound 1,000 times more devastating. The gunshot was a physical assault on his brain. A high-pitched, agonizing whine drowned out all other noise, leaving his thoughts scrambled in a haze of white-hot mental interference.
My bad, man.
Lin Yi glanced back, a faint, regretful smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, despite the carnage around them. As the mangled remains of the long-waisted creature began to stir again, Lin Yi's expression hardened. He had no time for a drawn-out fight. Every second wasted was a second Zhang Cheng and Lu Linhai spent in mortal danger. He had anticipated the threat the moment the man twitched. His finger had been hovering over the trigger, waiting for the exact moment those interlocking bones erupted from that freakishly elongated spine to deliver a decisive blow.
This isn't like any freak I've ever seen.
And Cheng Dao muttered, his eyes narrowing as he stared down at the mangled remains. He leaned closer, his brow furrowed in a grim mask of concentration as he examined the unnatural proportions of the cooling meat.
Take away that impossible waste, and he's almost human. Too human.
No human being has a spine that length. That's pure bone erupting through the epidermis, a structural impossibility.
Lin Yi felt a cold shiver trace a path down his spine. The memory of those interlocking ribs bursting through skin was enough to make his stomach churn with visceral revulsion. There was a deep-seated wrongness here that surpassed the obvious lethality of a mantis wolf or the crawling horror of the hair snails. This was a violation of the human form itself. The cloying, sweet-sour odor of advanced decay hung heavy in the air, a scent so thick it was almost palpable. This must have been the very source of the stench Chu Kai had detected earlier.
I can't even begin to guess how a biological entity ends up in this configuration.
Lin Yi whispered, already turning away from the charnel pile. He paused, his gaze drifting back toward the dark forest canopy as if searching for a logical explanation.
What if it's some kind of mimic? A predator that uses a human facade as a primary camouflage? Like a lure on an anglerfish. The human torso is just the bait, meant to draw us in before the real monster strikes. Enough. We need to keep moving.
They hadn't taken 3 steps before a sharp, dry rustle erupted from the mound behind them. It was a rhythmic, scratching sound that cut through the silence like a blade. Lin Yi pivoted, his eyes locking onto the center of the rat pile. From the jagged, raw edge of the man's severed waist, dozens of thin, pale meat sprouts were erupting like fungal growth. Each sprout branched out at the tip, twitching with a frantic, independent life as they groped blindly into the air, seeking purchase. The lower half of the creature was mirroring the movement, the meat sprouts from both ends intertwined, writhing in a sickeningly excited dance as they began to drag the upper body back toward the waist.
You've got to be kidding me. It's still alive.
Lin Yi's expression tightened into a mask of pure, concentrated frustration. He was well aware of the terrifying vitality freaks possessed, but this was a different level of horror. Blasting a creature in half usually spelled the end, yet this grotesque reconstruction was happening right before his eyes. He didn't waste another second. The hunting rifle snapped back into position, its barrel tracking the writhing meat with lethal intent. To guarantee the shot, he reached out with his mind, weaving a glowing silver thread of time that tethered his consciousness to Chu Kai's. The forest sharpened into a high-definition nightmare, every twitch of the meat sprouts rendered in crystal clarity. He shot a brief, meaningful glance at Chu Kai, confirming the link was established. The second bolt of energy slammed into the creature's upper torso, pulverizing the remaining human-like features into a cloud of red mist and charred meat.
Try coming back from that, you freak.
He lingered for a moment, his gaze fixed on the lower half that was still twitching amidst the rats. His finger hovered over the trigger, debating whether a third shot was necessary. Then, a sudden, chilling realization washed over him. He looked at the vast mountain of rat carcasses and felt a cold pit form in his stomach. Chu Kai's enhanced hearing had pinpointed 4 distinct voices pleading for salvation. One was now a heap of charred meat, but 3 more were still down there, buried under thousands of dead vermin. If the first one was this kind of biological nightmare, what were the chances the other 3 were anything less than horrific? Lin Yi and Cheng Dao both jerked to a standstill, their bodies tensing as the deafening cacophony vibrated through their very bones. The air itself seemed to tremble under the sonic assault.
Is that the mantis wolves? Are they back?
Lin Yi's knuckles turned white as he gripped his energy rifle, his eyes darting toward the source of the shriek.
No, that's not a biological cry. That's a signal, a whistle.
And Cheng Dao pointed a steady, calloused finger toward the heart of the forest. His expression was a grim mask of recognition. High above the dark, jagged canopy, a handful of obsidian shapes were circling. They had the silhouettes of oversized crows, but their flight patterns were far too rigid, too disciplined to be mere animals.
Quail hunters. Does that mean the masters have arrived? Are they already here?
Lin Yi felt his heart hammer a frantic rhythm against his ribcage. The mere thought of the slave masters being so close sent a wave of icy dread through his veins.
Perhaps not the elite, but they're hounds. They're definitely on the scent. If they've already secured the village perimeter, it's only a matter of minutes before they pinpoint our location.
Lin Yi's gaze snapped back to the horrific mound of rat carcasses. A paralyzing conflict tore at him. He couldn't abandon the others to this filth, but staying to dig would lead them straight into a quail hunter ambush.
We can't just leave them. We have to dig them out now.
There is 0 time for a rescue, Lin Yi. If we linger here for even a minute longer, we're all as good as dead.
I am not leaving my friends to rot under a pile of vermin while those things hunt us down. I'm not doing it.
The air between them crackled with tension, but before the argument could escalate further, the entire mountain of rat carcasses began to heave and buckle from within. Without warning, 3 pale, elongated hands erupted from the shifting carpet of rat carcasses. The skin was translucent, stretched tight over spindly bones that looked far too long to be human. 3 more figures hauled themselves out from the filth, their movements wet and heavy. Each one was a perfect, horrific duplicate of the man Lin Yi had just pulverized. They formed a silent, spectral row against the dark forest. Their bodies were deathly pale, their midsections distended into that same impossible, skeletal length that defied all biological logic. They didn't lunge, they simply stood there, their heads tilted in a synchronized, bird-like gesture, staring at the survivors with eyes that were nothing more than vacant, hollow pits.
There's more of them, an entire line.
Watch their hands. They aren't moving to strike. They're waiting.
As if controlled by a single mind, the three duplicates unhinged their jaws in perfect unison.
Help us! Please! It hurts so much, don't let them take us back.
A wave of paralyzing cold washed over Lin Yi. Those weren't just random pleas, they were the unmistakable voices of the classmates who had vanished into the woods days ago.
Is that Xiao Ming's voice? And Zhang Hua. I recognize that stutter. It's him.
Close your ears, Lin Yi. It's a lure, a psychological bait. They're stripping the memories from the dead to weave a trap for the living.
Right on cue, the three figures began to spasm. Their bodies jerked in a synchronized rhythmic twitching, an unnatural dance that signaled the end of their silent observation. The three duplicates didn't retreat. Instead, they began to liquefy, their pale forms sinking back into the gray carpet of rat carcasses. They melted into the filth like sugar in boiling water, leaving behind only a churning, viscous sludge.
Are they retreating? They're just giving up?
No. Look at the way the mound is shifting. They're not running, they're merging.
The mountain of vermin began to heave and split. From the center of the charnel pile, a colossal shape erupted, rising like a dark, wet monolith. It was a towering pillar of raw flesh and protruding bone, standing easily 10 feet high. The three men were no longer separate entities. Their faces were now grotesque, frozen masks embedded into the pulsating surface of the pillar, their mouths still locked in piteous O's of mimicked pain. Their elongated waists had fused into a single, massive trunk of corded muscle and bone. The entire structure pulsated with a slow, nauseating rhythm that made the ground beneath them vibrate. From the crown of the pillar, a nightmare head erupted. It was a horrific hybrid of human features and centipede anatomy, its surface covered in hundreds of unblinking obsidian eyes of varying sizes. Dozens of tiny, clicking legs lined its distended jaw, twitching in anticipation.
Is that it? Is that the source of everything we've seen?
It's a composite. A high-level freak born from the fusion of dozens of independent hosts, a biological singularity. And by the look of those eyes, it hasn't fed in a very long time.
Lin Yi didn't wait for the abomination to make the first move. He squeezed the trigger, sending a searing bolt of concentrated energy screaming toward the center of the pulsating pillar. The impact was silent. Instead of a violent detonation, the energy bolt simply vanished into the creature's mass, the surface of the pillar rippling like a disturbed pond as it swallowed the lethal charge whole. In horrific unison, the embedded faces unhinged their jaws. A collective, overlapping laugh erupted from the pillar, a mocking, metallic sound that seemed to vibrate the very air.
It just ate the shot? How is that even possible?
It's worse than absorption, Lin Yi. It's metabolizing the charge. You're not killing it, you're feeding it.
As if to confirm his words, the pillar began to pulse with a low, sapphire light. The glow was an exact match for the energy bolts from Lin Yi's rifle, coursing through the creature's transparent veins.
We're out of options. We cannot take this thing down here, not with the quail hunters already on our heels.
And Cheng Dao's hand clamped onto Lin Yi's shoulder like a vice, his grip firm and urgent. He jerked the younger man away from the horrific spectacle.
But what about the others? We can't just leave them buried with that thing.
Lin Yi's vision blurred, hot tears of pure, impotent rage and grief stinging his eyes as he looked back at the charnel pile.
They're already gone, Lin Yi. Look at the faces. That nightmare, it hasn't just buried them, it's consumed them.
Lin Yi forced himself to look. He realized with a sickening jolt that those weren't just mimicked masks, those were the physical remains of the students, their very essence subsumed into the biological monolith.
Move now. Run if you want to live.
They pivoted and sprinted into the dark, jagged embrace of the forest. Behind them, the piercing mechanical whistle of the quail hunters erupted again, sounding dangerously close. The forest was no longer just a graveyard. It had become a hunting ground, and the predators were closing in from every side.